Keep up with Scottish football with your host, John Turner.
So our guest on the Low Ball Show today is someone who's had a career with Kilmarnock, Rangers, Brighton, Man City, Oldham, FC Basel, Stranraer, has also been an assistant manager and a director of football. My guest today is Gordon Smith. Gordon, thanks for joining me today.
Pleasure, John. Pleased to be on. The only one you got wrong there was Stranraer. I wasn't ever at Stranraer.
Sorry, still in Albion. I can't read my own writing.
I was at Stirling for 3 games. I played there at the end of my career. I also played in Austria for Admira Wacker, a team in Vienna too.
So, I mean, looking back on it, obviously you had a kind of great start in Scotland with Kilmarnock and Rangers. What was the time at Kilmarnock like?
It was very interesting because I had the chance to go to Rangers, Celtic and Kilmarnock when I was 14. And my dad said, you go to Kilmarnock. And I said, because you're a fan? And he went, no, you'll get more of a chance there. And if you make it, you know, the big teams will come back in for you. So it was good advice because my pal went to Rangers and he never got the same sort of start as I got, because when the school holidays came along, I was 14 years old, John. And when the school holidays came, I was in training with the full-time players, doing all the training with them. So I was experiencing playing with senior professionals at the age of 14. And that was a great experience for me. So it worked out really well for me. Kilmarnock were the team that you know my dad wanted me to play for, but it was also my grandfather had played for Kilmarnock before me, and he had played. I never met him; he was dead before I was born, so I couldn't talk to him about it. But I signed there, and I was called up. I became a professional at 16, but I stayed on at school. My mum didn't want me to leave school, so I stayed on to do my hires, and I was actually in the Kilmarnock first team when I was still at school.
So how was that, being at school and then playing in the first team?
It was the strangest thing. You know, I played a Saturday, I'm a first team player playing against Rangers, Celtic, at Aberdeen, Dundee United, and a Monday I'm in a classroom as a pupil. You know, so it was the strangest thing. I never get too much attention from my fellow pupils. That nobody was ever like talking about it very much. I was just one of the school pupils, and nobody said too much about it. Even the teachers never ever brought it up or anything like that. It was incredible. So I just played away there, and that was me starting in the professional game at the age of, as I say, 17, and I was in the first team at that age. It was great to be playing at professional level.
Which is a shame, because if there was any teachers that were Kilmarnock fans, I'm sure you'd have got out of some homework.
You think I might have, but none of them ever expressed any support for Kilmarnock at the time. Although what happened was, my second year, I was in the first team, and then a PE teacher came to the school, and he was actually my teammate at Kilmarnock. He was actually a PE teacher, and he became a PE teacher at the school I was at. So during the week, a pupil and a teacher were at the same school, and on a Saturday we were teammates. That must be unusual. I'm not sure if that's ever happened anywhere else in the whole of the history of football, that a teacher and a pupil were in the same first team and a Premier League team.
And when you were at Kilmarnock, and then eventually, I think you were there for about 5 years.
I was in the first team for 5 years, yeah. And
then eventually you did kind of go to Rangers.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, it came about I was already left. I went on to do a degree after my school, and I got a BA Business Studies, and I became a marketing development manager for a company in Glasgow. And I was 10 days in the job when the phone rang in the morning. It was a Kilmarnock manager asking me where I was. I said, well, you should know where I am. You phoned me, you know. And he said, no, I got your number for the secretary. I said, I'm in my office. He said, you in Glasgow? I went, yeah. He goes, are you far from Ibrox? I said, no, why? Just sold you to Rangers. See you there in an hour, he said. That was me getting told that the Rangers had just bought me. That was a Monday morning. And so I was just left my work. I had to tell my bosses, I've got to nip out and deal with something. I'll be back a little while, but I've got something to deal with just down the road. They never asked where I was going or anything. And I went along to Ibrox, which was 5 minutes in the car, met Jock Wallace and signed the contract. And but the amazing thing was, Jock Wallace shook my hand and he said, well, welcome to the club. That's taken a while. I said, what do you mean? He said, I've been trying to sign you for the last 5 years. Do you know? No. I was like, no. Sorry, the last 4 years it was. He said, the last 4 years. I said, I didn't know. He goes, I've been in twice a year for you. Made a bid for you the last 4 years. And I said, Really? He goes, yeah. I said, well, I'm playing the wing at Kilmarnock. I says, I noticed you've signed Davy Cooper. And he said, yeah, but you're not going to play in the wing. He said, you're going to play midfield. That's where I first saw you play. I've been trying to buy you for 4 years to play midfield. That's where you're going to play for me. So that was me already playing the position I wanted to play rather than playing in the wing where I'd been playing for Kilmarnock.
What was that feeling like though when you left your work and you, and I know it was a short journey, like a 5 minute journey, but
Yeah.
being in that car, going over, knowing you've just been told you're signed for Rangers?
That was incredible moment because, as I say, I had no idea at that stage that Rangers had been trying to get me. And this was a Monday. The league had started on the Saturday. This was a Monday after the first game. And so I drove along there thinking, I can't believe this. My transfer's just happened. Went along there. But the funny thing was about it, John, I actually said to Jock Wallace, what's the programme here? He said, we train every morning. I said, what do we do in the afternoons? He said, generally you're free. I said, I've got a job just down the road. Can I work in the afternoons then? Can I keep working? And he said, yeah, if it doesn't interfere with your football, you can. So when I went back to my work, my business, I said to the people I was working for, two things I've got to tell you. One is, I've just signed for Rangers there. And they were like, you're joking? I went, no. I'm like, they went, oh, so you're leaving us? I said, no, that's the second thing I've got to tell you. I'm not leaving you. I'm staying on to work for you because they said I can work part-time. And they went, great. So I stayed on and worked for another 20 months in that job.
So how did you kind of feel juggling that then, like football and work? You know, because before it was football and school,
yeah,
and then it moved on to football and work.
Well, you know what the funny thing was, John? I think it turned out to be a good thing. You know why? Because in a lot of ways, then I actually had something else to think about, something else to take up my attention. So it wasn't because playing for Rangers is a pressurised position, right? Much more so than ever was at Kilmarnock. Because at Rangers, you know, it's a big fan base, right? And you're expected to win all the time. There's never any sort of argument that, oh, we didn't deserve to win today. It was just like the fans are angry if you don't win. And if you have 2 defeats in a row, it becomes a crisis. So I was quite fortunate, maybe in respect that I was going away during the week. I came in for training in the morning, but after that, I was away, had my lunch. Usually with 2 or 3 of the players. David Cooper and I were friendly, Derek Parlane, Bobby Russell, we were good pals. We'd go for lunch. But then I would say, bye, I'm away to work. And I would go and do my work. Now, see the fact that I was maybe concentrating on other things because I was the marketing development manager. I had to develop the sales for the club and business and all that thing. I think it made a great effect on me because it meant I could actually switch off from the football side of things and didn't think too much about it.
And, you know, at your time at Rangers, you know, because you were there, you know, for what, 3 years?
3 years, yeah.
You spent there. I mean, what was that experience like? Because you would have experienced a lot of highs and lows.
Yeah, it was a great experience for me because I was fortunate that I couldn't have dealt with if I had lows. If the lows had come first, it might have been more difficult for me to deal with after that, right? But the initial part of it was success. First season was there, we won the treble, and it worked out really well for me because I was in good goal scoring form. I fitted in well within the team, and I was very comfortable in the team. The players I was playing alongside were first class. And what happened was I scored 27 goals that first season. So that was great. The most goals I'd ever scored. But I was playing a position I wanted to play and alongside people who were creative and could make goals for me. So that first season was special. The second season was almost nearly as good because we also had a great run in Europe that year. We got beaten in the quarterfinals of what's now the Champions League by Cologne. And that was a big disappointment with injuries and suspensions and the season had been cancelled. A lot of games had been cancelled because of bad weather. It meant a lot of the fixtures had piled up, and that went against us a bit. So we went out in the quarterfinals of the League Cup, of the European Cup, and then having won the 2 cups, we also lost the league in the last game. Celtic beat us at Celtic Park. They had to beat us that night to win the league, and we had 2 games left with Celtic and Partick Thistle, and we even a draw would have been enough against that Celtic game as long as we beat Partick the next game. But we lost to Celtic at Celtic Park, and it was a big disappointment because, to be fair to Celtic, give them credit, it was a 10-man Celtic team that beat us. They had a man sent off, Johnny Dawg gets sent off, and Celtic had 10 men, and they beat us with 10 men. So they won the league that year. So rather than having 2 trebles in a row, it was a treble, then a double, but it was the 2 cups rather than the league, and that was a major disappointment. And I felt that after that, I think things went downhill a little bit. That was John Gregg's first season management. The next season, he was beginning to bring in players and change other players. And the next season, we didn't win anything at all. The third season I was there, it was a totally We got to the final. That was all we got to the Scottish Cup final, but we didn't play nearly as well as we'd been playing the previous seasons.
How did it feel like working under the likes of John Greig?
It was different because what happened was Jock Wallace was better for me to a degree because he'd signed me. And Jock Wallace, when a manager signs you, you're always much more comfortable with them. John Greig, was captain when I went in there, but then he became manager. So it was different. You could just tell at times that he had problems with in terms of certain things, how I played, and my game wasn't exactly the way he wanted me to play, things like that. So it was a bit more difficult, and that's why it became a bit more difficult for everybody, because there was a lot of players that began to leave out the team, changes. He was signing new players, bringing new players in. So it was not quite the same. And it's the whole thing about it, John, is it's a crucial element of any club is how it's managed, how the manager runs things, and how players react to that, and how things go. So, I still was happy to play for Rangers, though. That was the main thing for me. I was still highly motivated to do my best. And I was transferred at the end of that third season, right? But I just signed a 5-year contract. John Greig offered me a 5-year contract, and I had just signed it. I was a month into that contract when I was sold to Brighton.
And was that a surprise to you, I'm assuming, then?
A major surprise. I didn't expect to go. In the end up, I didn't want to go. In the end up, I was forced to go. I didn't realise at the time it was Rangers got a record fee for me at that time, the most money they'd ever had, and I think that was basically because John Greig was going to use that money then to bring in other players. So I was the one that went out the door in order to have that money. So it was quite tough, and I wasn't happy about it because, as I say, I didn't want to go, but I was forced to go. But I did meet John Greig, and after that, maybe in the next year or whatever, and I did say to him, "I'm sorry what you did to me. I didn't want to go, and I didn't think it was fair what you did, but I have to thank you because I'm enjoying it down there." It was a great experience to go down to Brighton, because at Rangers, all of a sudden, you're the top team. You're up there with Celtic, competing for everything. Although in those days, you also had more competition from like Aberdeen, Dundee United, and things like that, right? So it wasn't just about two teams, but it was competitive. But down in England, it's totally different. It's masses of big clubs down there, and that's why it was enjoyable to go down and play at the highest level in English football.
Because, I mean, in England, you obviously the time with Brighton and also the likes of Man City playing with, but in between, you went back to Rangers for a couple of games.
Yeah, what happened was I got a phone call from Tommy McLean, who was assistant to John Greig, and he said to me, "Would like you to come back for a month's loan." And I wasn't sure about it. I was like, "Well, okay." I said, "I'll think about it and come back to you." So I went to see it was amazing. I went to see the chief scout at Brighton. It was a guy called Jimmy Amelia, right? He was Liverpool, used to play with Liverpool. He was the chief scout, and he said to me, "Let me tell you, Gordon," he says, it was December, it was meant to be going up, right? He said, "Go up there and you can have a month with your family in Scotland. You can have a play for Rangers." He says, "And when your month's up, you come back down here. I'll be manager here." And that's what he said. And I went, "What?" And he goes, "Don't tell MD, it's between you and me. This is the manager's getting sacked, and I'm going to be the manager here when you come back." So I couldn't believe it. I was like, "Okay." So I phoned Tommy McLean up and I said, "Right, I'm coming up for a month. I'll come in the month's loan." And I said, "I'll be up on Monday." Then he went, "What do you mean Monday?" I said, "Well, I know you've got a cup final on Saturday. League Cup final it was, right?" And he went, "No, we want you for the final." And I said, I'm coming up to play in the cup final." And he went, "Yeah." So I was like, okay. I couldn't believe that. And I thought, all right, should I do this or not? But I did. I went up and played in the League Cup final. That was my game I went up for. But so it was incredible. We got beaten again from Celtic. That game, we beat 2-1. But it was incredible to go up and play in a final. I didn't think it was fair to do that. You know why? Because my mindset was the fact that somebody who's maybe been playing in other games in the cup to get to that final is going to be left out for me. So, but it just showed you there were a degree of desperation in order to fact we need to get a player in playing this cup final. So that's what happened. I went back and played in that, John.
And how did that feel though, coming back after how you'd left and never wanted to go?
It felt strange because you felt as if it was like things had gone downhill for me, because all of a sudden you're back on loan at Rangers, and that's what put me down in it a wee bit. I wasn't that keen on it because it just felt, oh, he's a loan player he's obviously not doing all that well at Brighton either. But the thing was that I had fallen out with the manager down there, and that's why I was out the team. But I knew in a month's time I was going back up. So I knew it wasn't going to be a case of signing for Rangers again, because even when I went up there, I have to say this, the players, I got the impression from the players who were currently playing at that time that they were on a bit of a downer. There was a bad atmosphere about the club, about the whole dressing room and everything. And that came through in the basis of the cup final, how things were going. It wasn't a good performance. And as I say, when it was finished, I think I played one more league game in that month, and then after that, nothing. I just spent time in Glasgow, just training, and until such times as I went back down to England at the end of that month. When my month was up, I was back down in England. It was January now, and Jimmy Melia was now manager.
And was that a kind of good feeling then when you went back? Obviously, you saying having a fallout with the manager, to get back and have somebody there that you did have a good relationship with? Yes,
it was good. The fact that made it easier to go back down there, because I was going back down there with the manager who had said, I want you back down here. I'm looking forward to you coming back, because you're going to be in my team when you come back down. So that was a major difference that I knew going back down there, even though the Rangers thing hadn't worked out. I went back down there and got in the team right away with Brighton.
And then, I mean, from Brighton, you went to Man City. How was that kind of playing with one? I mean, obviously now, you know, everybody sees what Man City are, but you know, back then, obviously, this was before the cash comes in.
Correct. Yeah. Well, I'll sum up how the difference is. I had to take a wage cut to go to Man City, so I don't think I have to do that now. You know what I mean? I don't think I had to take a wage cut. They couldn't afford my Brighton wages. But it was the strangest thing, because what happened was Billy McNeil, after I signed for Man City, Billy McNeil bought me for Man City, and he told me, which something I didn't know, he said he tried to sign me for Aberdeen that weekend when I went to Rangers. I was like, you were in for me as well? Yeah, he was manager Aberdeen at the time. He says, and did you not know Celtic were in for you too? I said, no. He said, the three clubs were in for you, and we thought you chose Rangers. I said, I might still have chosen Rangers. I don't know. I probably would have. But I said, I didn't know you and Celtic were in. He said, Jock Stein and I were both in for you that weekend. And he said, you didn't know? I said, no, I didn't know. So that was incredible. So I went to Man City, and because Billy McNeil, like I mentioned before, Alan Mullery, when he took me to Brighton, because he wanted me, it made it a lot easier to go there and play for somebody who obviously liked the way I played. You know, the fact was that he'd actually tried to sign me for Aberdeen years before, meant that he liked my style of football.
And I suppose you've kind of answered it, but if knowing at the time they were the three clubs in for you, looking back, would it have been Rangers you would have chose?
It would have been Rangers I would probably have chosen as a team. But do you know the funny thing is, I look back on it now and you just wonder whether sitting in front of the three people, I didn't realise at the time how good Jock Wallace was as a person and how good he was as a manager to play for him, right? And so, of the three of them there, in terms of reputation, Jock Stein would have been a hard one for me to turn down in respect. You know what I mean? Because you're thinking, this is one of Scotland's greatest ever managers, wants me here. And, you know, I don't know how it would have been with that, because I might have just said, I would have see if Rangers hadn't come in for me and it was just Celtic, I would have no problem at all playing for Celtic, right? Because for me, I just wanted to do my best in football and play at the highest level. So whether it was Rangers or Celtic wouldn't have mattered. But I was a Rangers fan growing up, and therefore that was why it was special to me to get the chance to play for them, having supported them as a boy. Because I was a Kilmarnock fan initially, and then my family were all Kilmarnock. But then I saw Jim Baxter playing, and I became a big Jim Baxter fan, and that's why I switched towards Rangers, because I wanted to be like Jim Baxter, and it became a Rangers thing for me. So that's how that came about. But it's been a difficult one. I'm not joking when I say it. It's been very, very hard for me to turn around to Jock Stein and say, I'm not coming to you. You know what I mean?
And obviously you did a bit, another spell in England with Oldham for a kind of short period of time.
Yeah. I got a bad injury, John, when I was playing with Man City. It was an illness more than it was called osteomyelitis. It's a bone marrow infection you get, and I was out of the team. I was in hospital for 3 weeks, then I was in bed at home for about another 3 weeks, and I was out of the team, and they brought in a young lad called Paul Simpson, who went on to become a top-class player for Man City. He came in and played my position. So when I was fit and able again, I wasn't getting a game. And so when Billy McNeil said to me, Oldham would like you in the loan, I decided to go along, and it was Joe Royal was the manager for Oldham at that time, one of the great England players, and he had said to me, I've seen you playing a few times, I really want you here. So I went on a month's loan to begin with, but then when the month was up, it went so well that I signed then until the end of the season for Oldham, because they were playing me every week, and we were in a good run, and we were challenging for promotion to the top league.
And how did you, the kind of time that you'd spent there, would that have been, was there any chance of staying on there, or?
Yes, he wanted me to stay on. But what happened was there was a player for Oldham at that time called Dave Fairclough. And Dave Fairclough had played for Liverpool. He was called the super sub. I think he used to come on and score goals. And quite funnily, he said to me about my second or third day, he said, I hear you could have gone to Austria. And I went, how do you know that? Billy McNeil had actually said to me, there's an Austrian club wanting you. And he said, are you willing to go? And I said, I'm not sure. I don't know if I want to go there. So Dave Fairclough told me, because I said, how do you know about that? He said, the agent took me to Switzerland. He'd been in Switzerland. The agent took me to Switzerland, told me that he was keen to get you a club in Austria, want you. So I said, give me his number. So I phoned this guy up, Helmut Eppie's name was, and he said to me, this club are quite keen to get you in. They've seen footage of you, videos and things like that. He said, would you be interested? And I said, yeah, I think I would be, because I thought about it, and then because I was at that time I was keen to become a football manager and a coach, and I thought that'd be a great experience to go abroad now, because I played in Scotland, then England, then go and play in Austria would give me great football experience. So I decided to go, and at the end of that season, I negotiated with the end of the season with Oldham. I then went to Vienna.
What was the kind of difference like culture-wise, football, training-wise?
Amazing difference. It really was, John. It was a great experience. I'll tell you why. The first thing, the most difficult thing initially when I went over there was nobody could speak English at the club. The manager, the players, nobody spoke English apart from the chaplain. And the chaplain of the club used to come in twice a week. That was it. And I then took a course, a cassette course in German, and I used to learn it and then speak to him to try and see if I was getting it right. And I worked hard on it. And once I became fluent, everything was better. It became really good. But the other side of it was, in terms of football, it was very good. The training was excellent. In terms of it was a lot. Most of the training was with the ball. There was very little things that you just running on its own. But the other aspect was very strong, was the scientific thing of the training, because what they did was they had doctors in testing you, testing your recovery, testing your level of body fat, everything, and making it. And then they put you into groups according to your fitness level. Now, one of the complaints I had about that was I was actually doing harder training than other people. I was in the top group, and I went and complained about it once I could speak German. But the manager said, no, you're all training at the same level, because you all train at a maximum peak of your heart rate. So I did agree. I thought that is true. We're all training at the same heart rate level, but I have to work a lot harder to get to that heart rate level, because I was in the fit group. But then I went to him and said, look, I know you made a good point there, but the point I would make is that regardless of whether I'm doing the same training as everybody else, on a Saturday, I must be playing with people who are not as fit as me, and they can't do the job I'm doing. So I must be working harder in a match day. And he went, that's a good point. He said, that is a good point. We should look at that. He says, because we need to have everybody at the highest level. So that he did take on board what I said there. He was a great player. He played with Bayern Munich and all this guy. Gustav Starek, his name was. He'd been a Bayern Munich player, and that was what he said to me. He would do that. But it was an interesting story, John. I'll tell you, this is a funny one. He said to me one day, once I could speak English, he said, "You're Scottish, aren't you?" And I went, "Yeah." And he goes, "Do you ever remember a player called Jim Baxter?" That's what he said to me, and I went, "Yes, I do actually." One of my favourite players. He says, "I was a young player at Rapid." He said, "I was on the bench, I wasn't playing, and what happened was," he said, Rangers against Rapid, he said, it's one of the finest performances I have ever seen from a player. He said he was fantastic. And I said, I remember that game. I said, Jim Baxter broke his leg that night. And he said, yes, they were trying to break his leg, he said. I went, what? And he said, the manager, at half time, the players were saying, this guy's so good, we can't get near him. And he goes, there's only one way to stop him then, injure him. That's what the manager told them. And Jim Baxter got his leg broken that night. Now, this is a guy that played with Bayern Munich alongside Müller and Beckenbauer and all these people.
Yeah.
And he's telling me one of the finest performances he'd ever seen was Jim Baxter that night. And I couldn't believe it because, as I say, when you become a fan growing up, you don't expect somebody in Austria to be telling you that one of the best performances you've ever seen is your favourite young player, your favourite player is a youngster.
And that must have been good though, because having that as well, did you find, having that common ground and seeing that, Jim Baxter being somebody that you kind of emulated to be, and then having him saying that?
Yeah, that was incredible. As I say, just right out of the blue, of all the people to say, you speak. Do you remember a player called Jim Baxter? Yeah. So it was fantastic. I mean, and one of the things was it was funny when I went to Rangers years late. When I was at Rangers at the time, before I went there, Jim Baxter was one of the people who did a piece in the paper saying when I signed for Rangers and played a few games, he said, "What a great signing Gordon Smith is for the club and all that." And I was like, it was one of the biggest compliments, best compliments that I've ever had, because Jim Baxter said it. You know what I mean? So if anybody else had said it, wouldn't have meant as much. But because he praised me, I loved it.
So I assume that was a snippet that was cut up and framed.
It probably is somewhere, yeah.
From there, you moved to Basel.
Yes.
FC Basel.
Yeah. What happened was the club, it was an interesting one. It shows you what can happen here. But a lot of people talk about clubs amalgamating, John, right? And what happened was the two teams, the team I played for in Vienna were an amalgamation of two clubs, Admira Vienna and Wacker Vienna, right? They amalgamated. Now the crowds were about 9,000 each, and they amalgamated, and the crowd was 6,000. They thought they were going to have about 17,000, 16,000 fans. But know what happened? The fans don't associate with the new team, and they don't go anymore, right? So I've always used this when people are saying, "Oh, Dundee and Dundee United should amalgamate, and Hearts and Hibs and all that." I said, no. My experience was it doesn't work, right? Because it didn't work there. Now, what happened was I was probably maybe one of the higher earners. Me and the two boys, Yugoslav players that were there, they allowed 3 foreign players, and they came to us and said, "We need you to go. We can't afford your money," after the first year. And the funny thing was that I'd scored the goal. This was before actually the season was finished, and they said, "We need you to go because we can't afford you." And the 2 Yugoslav players said, "Okay," and they just left the club right away. I said, "No, my family's here. I've got another year in my contract to go. I want to be paid." So what happened was, it was the funniest thing. There was 3 games to go, John, right? And we needed 1 point from 3 games. It was 2 points for a win those days. We needed 1 point for a win to qualify for Europe. And what happened was, they left me out of the team. The 2 Yugoslav boys went away, and they got beaten the first game. Second game, a home game, we got beaten again. Third game, they're playing away from home in Lask, and it was 1-0, and there was 15 minutes to go. And I went and warmed up. I just got off the bench and went and warmed up. 5 minutes, 6 minutes warm up. I came back down. I stood in front of the manager. He was standing at the touchline. I stood in front of him and I said, "Are you going to put me on?" And he said, "Are you going to score?" I said, "Yes, I will." "Okay, get stripped. You're going on." They put me on. I couldn't believe it. Like, with 2 minutes to go, 3 minutes to go, I scored the goal to make 1 each, right? And you'll never believe this, John. The players carried me off on their shoulders at the end of the game, because that was us in Europe, right? And on the way home in the bus, we're sitting there, and this guy, Gusto Starrick, the manager, came up, and he was talking to us. We're all sitting at a table quite kind of high up, and he said to me, "Well done, Gordon. It's just fantastic getting that goal. That was so good. You asked to go on," and he scored. And then I felt him rustling down at my feet, and my sock. And when he walked away, I put my hand down, and there was a big bundle of notes in my sock. A big bundle of notes down my sock, equivalent to about £500. That was my reward. That was my reward for getting him into Europe. Now, what happened was, then that was the season finished. I thought maybe I won't be going here. But the season, the summer break was very short there, and it started up again. And I was left out of the team still at that time. Didn't even get a game, on the bench, not playing. So eventually they came along and said, "Look, we do need you to go." And that guy Helmut Ipper spoke about took me to Austria. He came back and said, "I've got you a club in Switzerland, FC Basel, want you?" So that was good, because what was fortunate about that was the fact they speak German in Basel. That's the German part of Switzerland. So it meant I didn't need to learn the language, and I went over there and fitted in right away because I could speak German.
And how was your time over there? I think you were only there for what, a year?
I had 1 season, yeah. I stayed 1 season. They wanted me to stay on, but my wife had come back here because the kids don't start school in Austria and Switzerland until they're 7, and my kids were around about 5, 6 years old. And we felt they're going to have to wait till they're 7. So my wife came home, and I was on my own in Switzerland. Just the club gave me a flat and that. So, but I was over there myself, so at the end of that season, they offered me another deal, and I said no. I turned it down, and I had the chance to go to Germany as well, to Schalke. And I said no, because I'm going back to Scotland. Now, the amazing thing was I came back to Scotland and I was just about 34, and I couldn't believe I couldn't get a club in Scotland. Now, I was as fit as I'd ever been, John. Never any less fit than I'd ever been. I was 34, and a few of the managers said to me, "Can't sign you because of your age." I said, "Test my fitness." And he went, "No, it's not to do with your fitness. If we sign a player at 34, the fans will crack up. The fans will go crazy, so we can't sign you." I couldn't get a club, and that's why the only chance I got to play some games was still in Albion, to play some trial games with them. I played 2 or 3 games with them, but then I got offered a job in the financial services down in England because I'd done. These people found out that I'd been on courses where I was still playing football, doing to learn about insurance and investment and all that sort of thing. This company knew about it, and they had a lot of clients in the football world, so they came on to me and offered me a job in London, and I gave up playing completely and went down to London.
So when you were playing, because I know kind of previously you'd mentioned about, thinking about being a manager and going abroad, but did you always have that in the back of your head that in regards to football, maybe the path would end up elsewhere, which is why you continued to do courses?
Yeah, I did. I always wanted to be. It was like me barely doing my degree and all that. It was actually doing something that you knew you could another sideline. You know what I mean? You could actually, if football didn't work out, I had an alternative. Do you know what I mean? So that was the case. But I was in that job for I think it was in the job for about 2.5 years when Tony Fitzpatrick got in touch with me. I'd been on a coaching course with Tony doing my A license, and Tony got in touch and said, Frank McGarvey's left me to go to Queen and South as manager. He says the assistant manager's job is available. I'd like you to come in as my assistant manager. Now, I didn't know Tony at all. We'd only just been together in this coaching course, but he saw from the coaching course, in terms of how I put things across, my ideas were slightly different because I had been learning a lot of stuff in Austria and Switzerland, just in terms of how to coach and how to put coaching sessions together. So Tony wanted me to go to St Mirren, and I did. I left my job in London, and I just said, I'm sorry, I've got a manager's job, and that's why I took up assistant manager's job at St Mirren.
And then when we look at kind of your time at St Mirren, how did you feel? Because obviously it had been a while that you had been in the game. You'd went away, you took the other job. Had you seen anything kind of progressing or any changes since?
No, I hadn't really. I hadn't seen much of it. One of the things that I did bring in there, John, was the fact that I did quite quickly caught on to the fact that the players needed. We needed to test the players as well, which we didn't do in Scotland at the time. A physical test to find out their level of fitness, recovery, their body fat levels. Their just different things about their how they are in terms of like their what would you say, their stamina, basically, all that type of thing. And I put in different training sessions to find that out. And it was quite a shock, even for Tony, to find out that a lot of them players were less fit than they should have been at that level. So that was one of the things that I felt had to be brought in. So I was doing these things, and then Davy Hay came in. Tony left, and Davy Hay came in as a manager. And I liked working with Davy too. Davy and I got on well. Davy gave me a lot of power to make decisions and run the second team and the youth development and all that sort of thing. I was very much involved in the youth development. That was a side of things that I felt we needed to work on, because I did feel that at times that at youth level that the youth coaches weren't given the right sort of training and instructions for kids as they were growing up. And it was a shame, because the biggest problem I felt was young centre-backs. When we ever did trials, I never signed one young centre-back. You know why? Because they'd all been discouraged from actually playing football. It was like the managers, when I used to go and watch youth games, I'd hear the manager shouting at the boy, "Hey, you stop the fancy stuff, just kick it out of the park, just kick it away." And they think, wait a minute, the boy's trying to control the ball and start a move, and yet he was getting this, he was getting told not to do it. So what I ended up having to do was get midfield boys, bigger ones, stronger ones, and then convert them to centre backs, because the centre backs that were coming through youth level just weren't of a quality, and I felt really sorry for these kids because it was how they were getting coached. So it's things like that I tried to change, and I quite enjoyed it. Davey, he let me have a lot of power there as well. Then Jimmy Bone came in, and Jimmy and I we got on quite well up to a stage, but Jimmy was harder. He was old school, harder with young players than I felt was necessary. You know, Jimmy was very critical of them, and he thought that strengthened them, that made them stronger mentally and all that. Whereas I felt, no, you're actually giving them a hard time. You're destroying some of them, because you have to realise that some kids can take it and some can't. And it's a case of, criticise if their attitude's wrong, but don't criticise their mistakes as much as that. So Jimmy and I, we didn't get on as well as we should have, and I decided to leave. But it was quite funny because I'd already started working, doing some media stuff before I left the job at St Mirren. And it was quite funny because immediately then the BBC came on to me, and that was me right into, from being the management side, right into the media side. And that stopped me basically looking for jobs. I did go offered a couple other jobs after that to go back into football, and said, no, I'm happy doing the media side.
And when you had went, obviously, because being a player to assistant manager, how did you feel the transition?
I think it was quite. It's not that difficult, I don't think, because I just feel because I've been a player, I think you generally get. I was quite lucky. You generally get a bit of respect from the people who you're talking to.
Yeah.
But as I say, it's down to how you are with players, because the biggest aspect, and I've always been very strong on this, and to this day I'm doing it. I might talk about this later on, but the fact is that the three aspects of football to be a player is you need stamina, you need fitness, you need ability, but the third aspect that a lot of people discount is mentality. You need to be right up here. That's a crucial element. It's like having a good attitude to it, being able to accept criticism, being able to be committed and motivated at all times in yourself, and have a belief in yourself, even though you know at times you've made mistakes. Mistakes are made by everybody, and you need to deal with the fact that, right, okay, I made a mistake. It took me a little while to get on with that when I was playing, because what happened was, sometimes in a game, when I started playing at the highest level, if I made a mistake early on, I was really worried about it. But then if I made a mistake early on, but then it went on to a good game, it got me the strength and character to just think that can happen all the time. You can start off making a mistake. You can make a mistake at any time in the game. You just forget it. You think about the quality you've got and what you can offer. And I always was one for working as hard as I can and judging myself. Didn't matter to me after I was 17, 18 years of age, what the manager said to me, John. I never bothered with that. I judged myself. If I wasn't happy, even if the manager said, well played, and I didn't think I played well, I would be hard on myself. So it was always self-judgment.
And do you think, when you were either, whether it be playing or when you were at your time as assistant manager at St Mirren, that these characteristics were stuff that not only you had, but that you felt that you tried to kind of brush off onto others?
Yeah, I've always been opinion of that you say to people, because it's quite funny, because there's loads of really good players don't make it, and it's not their ability that stops them making it. It's their mentality. It's actually maybe they've decided to go and live their life another way. They get involved in maybe the drinking side of things, partying, all that sort of thing, and they don't have the professionalism to actually realise, wait a minute, I've got to work hard at this and concentrate first and foremost on being the best you can be at football, and then enjoy the other things after that. So I was always of a belief that said to players, live your life in the right way in order that you can play. I mean, I never had a drink till I was 25 years of age. Never touched alcohol till I went down to Brighton, and it was only because of peer group pressure. The fact that the rest of the players were big drinkers, and I ended up having a drink, so that I was one of the lads and wasn't getting discounted, because at the end of the day they weren't happy with me, because we're on nights out I was in Coca-Cola and they didn't like that. So I'd have a beer then after a shandy or whatever. So I was always of a belief that you have to be correct in terms of how you deal with things. I also said I'd faults in my game. I knew that. I was certain things that I wasn't good at, and I knew that let me down to a degree. But then what happened was I tried to work on those things, but I worked on the things I was good at as well to try and improve them, so that I had something to offer, so that when people were choosing a team or a player how to play, then they would consider me because of what I could do. One of the good things was I was a runner. I could run pretty well at times. I could dribble, and I was two-footed, because the funny thing was, from the Jim Baxter element, because he was left-footed, John, I started playing my left foot when I was a wee boy. It turned out to be the best thing ever, because what happened was, because I'd started so early using my left foot, then a lot of people thought that I was naturally left-footed, and I wasn't. And I remember finishing that story, but the commandant manager, Willie Fernie, came in. I'd been in the first team for a year playing middle and midfield, and he put me in the wing, right? And I went to him after 3 or 4 games, and I said, "Look, boss, you put me in the wing. I'm a midfield player. I want to play there." And he goes, "Oh, I need to put you in the left wing, son. I need a left-footed player out there." And I says, "I'm no left-footed." And he went, "Aye, yeah." You look back now, and I think, at the time I didn't realise it, but you look back now and you go, that's a bit of a compliment when he's arguing with me. I'm right-footed and he's telling me I'm left-footed. So things like that, I was lucky. I was fortunate in that respect, that because I was two-footed, that was a big factor in terms of how I played the game. I was never ever, defenders couldn't show me one side to try and put me on my bad side, because I didn't have a bad side, you know what I mean? So that was fortunate. So I think the mentality aspects we're speaking about, John, is crucial in terms of making it in the game. It's quite funny. I've done a few interviews on players doing these sort of nights out for the 5-star people, and a lot of times I'll say to them, "See, when you were a young player in your team, was there somebody better than you?" And they go, "Yeah." And I said, "Did he make it?" "No." You know what I mean? So there's better players right down the line that don't make it.
And do you think, for you though, obviously we're talking about mentality, and especially when you compare it to maybe now, that you trained but then you worked, so you had that, double job ultimately, where other people maybe, after that, when they had their own time, were trying to fill those gaps?
It's a good point. I think that did help, because what do guys do? I mean, the guys maybe nothing to do, so they go with their pals, then they maybe start drinking. They maybe play golf, right? But they maybe go gambling, which a lot of players do. That becomes a big aspect, because every afternoon there's a race meeting somewhere, right? And a lot of the players, it happens all the time. I mean, the gambling in the old days was horses and greyhounds, whereas nowadays they can bet in the football and all that as well. They can spend a lot of money in bookies. But so you're absolutely right. I had other things to concentrate on in terms of my job, things I was working for the company. I'd even to maybe do reports for them, things like that. So I'd even go home at night and I'd to work at night, do reports for them, and then the next morning I'm at training. Then I'm straight to there, go a bite to lunch, and then into work. So it probably did help. As I'm saying, it took me my mindset off, how's the football going, or how's this, or how will I live my life and all that. I had something which was of real interest.
And when you look, so obviously, as you say, you'd stepped away from St Mirren, you had the job in the media, but then you eventually went back into football.
Yeah. What happened, John, was when I still went back in the media, but I also went back into financial services. I worked for a firm, and a firm of chartered accountants brought me in as a financial services manager, right? And what happened was, though, that I suggested to them we start an agency, a football agency, because I was bringing in a lot of players for financial advice. And I said, agency's becoming the big thing now. So we brought in an agent, and we ran an agency firm within the chartered accountants. But then what happens, he left, the agent that I brought in left, and went to a job in football as a scout, actually. And they said to me, "Will you do the job?" I was like, "Well, I'm in the media, I'm not sure I should be doing this." But I decided to do it. And then I decided I didn't need the firm of chartered accountants to run this business. I can run this my own as an independent agency. And that's what I did. I took it away from them, and I became an agent. And I was an agent for about 7 years when the SFA job came along.
And just to kind of quickly touch on the agent aspect of it, because you were an agent for quite a lot of players during the time. And I suppose the kind of point I'm trying to go to was, do you feel, because a lot of them were, there was like big name players, and amongst all this, do you feel that there was no kind of financial advice when they were signing for clubs?
Yeah. Well, I was able to help in that respect, because I was able to give the players, help with their contracts and things like that, which was important, but also their life as well, in terms of setting themselves up for their pensions and putting investments and things like that. So that was the important thing. And I could also help negotiate their contracts because I was used to doing the financial side of things too. So when I sat down with the chairman of a club negotiating the contract, I was able to do it on the basis of my knowledge of what was required. Now, a lot of people think, oh, our agents, wrong people to be in the game and all that. But I'll tell you this, John, that what happened was when I was playing the game, I never got told about these moves. Were like that Celtic and Aberdeen were in for me. I found out later on Manchester United tried to buy me. I never knew that when I was at Kilmarnock. Now, what I'm saying is that agents, in my day when I was playing, you never found out what was going on because the clubs were dealing club to club. But when agents came along, and I found this out being an agent, that when a club was wanting a player and they found out you were his agent, they would phone you and ask if would your player be interested in coming to us? And I would say I'd find out how much money is he looking for. And generally what happened was you negotiated the contract before the club even made the bid. So they knew if the other club accepted the bid, the player had already agreed what his terms were. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's why agents were very important for the game in these days, because you find out a lot better in terms of what clubs have to offer. In my day, you never found out these things because there was no agents doing the business. You know what I mean? It was just like the club to club. And that's why, as an agent, I was able to help players, as I say, but the financial side of things, and also giving them advice. It was quite funny because what was a good aspect of it, John, was I had good contacts in the game. So a lot of the times I could find out how much the clubs actually paid. And that's a thing from people I knew. You know what I mean? So I could find it so that the clubs couldn't kid me on, because once or twice it did happen. The chairman of the club I'm negotiating would say, we're making your player the highest paid player. Here's what we're offering him. And I would say, your players more money than that. How do you know? And I say, because I know. And I know you're telling me lies, right? So that's how it worked.
And when you look back, so obviously you're saying what you brought in and what you tried to offer because it wasn't there. When you look back to your day and when you played, was not having that, do you look back and find a bit of a frustration, finding out that the likes of Manchester United, Celtic, Aberdeen were all in for you and it was never presented to you?
Yes. Oh, definite frustration, because, as I say, the classic was the fact that, the one I'm telling you about, Man United, I was at dinner one night, and it's about 20 years ago now, and Tommy Docherty was speaking at it, and Tommy Docherty, ex-Scotland manager, Man United manager, during his speech, he suddenly went, I see Gordon Smith there. I tried to sign Gordon as Man United manager, and he went on my speech. So I went up afterwards and I said, hi, Tommy. He goes, hi, Gordon. I said, see what you said up there? Is that true? And he went, you didn't know? I said, no. He said, it was a Friday. I offered Kilmarnock, you were 19 years old. That's what he told me. He said, you were 19 years old. I offered Kilmarnock 100,000 for you. They accepted it. And I said, they accepted it? And he said, yes. They said, we can do the deal on Monday. Kilmarnock said, can Gordon play for us tomorrow? And Tommy said, okay. He said, you must have played well. I went, why? He goes, when I went back on Monday, they wanted more money. And he said, wait a minute here. I offered 100,000 on Friday. That's the deal. He said, they still kept trying to negotiate. And eventually Tommy said, look, if you don't stop this, I'm putting the phone down on you. And he said, I did. And that was me finding out 30 years later that he'd been in for me with 100,000 bid, and Kilmarnock had accepted it initially and then knocked it back. So I could have been a Man United player then. Now, little things like that are frustrating, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know how my career would have gone after that, but you just think, I never knew about it. I never had the choice to even say, look, go to Kilmarnock and say, I want to go. That's a big bid. It was a big bid at that time for a 19-year-old, 100,000. And yet I never even knew anything about it until 30 years later.
And I suppose then a lot of that, where it was frustrating, must have felt quite good knowing that what you were then bringing in to do was changing all that, so that players weren't 30 years down the line being in that position.
Correct. That's a good point, John. That's why I was always happy. And also at times I would also say to the player, because maybe it's fortunate because I was earning money in the media side of things as well. So the money I was earning from an agency wasn't my only income. So I was quite comfortable to actually advise players on the right things to do rather than thinking, how much am I going to make from this? Now, what I used to say to all the players was the fact that let's make all the decisions, football decisions, rather than financial. So if it's the right thing football-wise, do it. I said, because that'll end up being financially better for you anyway. So if a club's in for you, if it's the right club, the right move, and that's why sometimes some younger players, Kenny Miller was a good example actually, that when Rangers came in for Kenny, I put it to him, I said, look, it's a great move for you, Kenny, if you want to go to Rangers. He said, I do. I said, think about this. You might not be a first choice player there. You know, you've worked your way into Hibs and you're a first choice player at Hibs. Think about that. You know, the money's good and everything, but you want to go and be in a position where you're going to have to fight for a place and you're not going to be first choice. And he went, yeah, I still feel I can do that. I want to go. And so I put it to him in that respect, and he decided he still wanted to go to Rangers in order to fight for his place and work his way through and become a first team player.
And did you feel a lot of times when you were given the advice, though, that your kind of background and what you had achieved meant that it was easier to get players to listen to you?
Well, I think so. I don't think there's any doubt about that. It did help. You know, I think that the fact was that, you know, they could tell because of where I played. I mean, to be able to say, like, I played at highest level in 4 countries. You know, I said I've negotiated contracts before for myself, but I said at least at the end of the day, you are going to earn more money than I earned in my time because the money was going up all the time. You know, but yeah. I said nevertheless, I think that the best thing to do is I'm giving you advice a lot, even from things that happened that weren't in favour, that I wasn't pleased with. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't as if everything was great and worked out well, John. It was like, this is what I wish had happened to me. This is what I wish I had done. You know, that's how I dealt with a lot of it. And because of my experience in the game and the people I knew and the people I could talk to, even other agents and things like that, and finding out stuff, I felt that I'd built up a knowledge of the business enough to be able to help players in terms of the agency side, help players do the right thing ultimately, so that they would benefit from it in a football sense, but also in a financial sense, and also in terms of their lifestyle and their way forward in their future. Because at times I've even suggested some of them, you know, like try and do other things, take courses, you know, to improve your education and your background, so that in years to come you can maybe do other things too.
And then when you were doing all this, was it the SFA job? Yeah,
the SFA approached me about doing the job and offered me the job. And I've been an agent for about 7-8 years when I get the call from the SFA to ask if I would apply for the job. And I said, I wasn't really thinking about it. And they said, well, you're one of the people we're considering. So I went along to see them, and then they offered me the job. I didn't do my due diligence on it. And what happened was I found out, like, after I took the job, that I couldn't make any decisions, really. Decisions were all made by the board or a committee or whatever. I thought as chief executive, I would have the strength and power to actually change things myself, but I couldn't. All I could do was make recommendations. Now, as I say, it was interesting. One of the reasons I took the job was because it was great experience to find out about how things are actually run in the game, even at domestic level, but also in European level, world level, because I was involved with UEFA and FIFA, all that type of thing. Yeah. And that's why that's one of the reasons I took the job, because I did want to find out more about because a lot of the times, I said before, used to talk on the radio about certain things, and I found that even after I came out the SFA, I hear people talking about things, and they don't really have any idea how the whole process works. They don't, and they make it up as they go along and speak about things. But once I was in there, it was a major shock to find out how things happen at FIFA level, UEFA level, and even domestically, who makes the decision on things.
So if you were like ever to recommend something, would that be quite a timely process, I'm assuming?
What used to have to maybe go to a board meeting. I recommended it, and then it would have to go to a board or a committee, whatever. It depends what you were recommending on. It would go to a board or a committee, and then it was the board meetings were one a month, so it would have to wait a month. Because one of the first things I wanted to do was I recommended that the team who were runners up in the Scottish Cup should not be in Europe, because I said that I disagree with that, because I said a team could play nobody all the way through the cup, play lower division teams, then get beaten in the final from the league champions, and then that puts them in Europe. And I always felt that's unfair, because you know this team's not done very much to get into Europe. Yeah. And I said, then if it's a runner-up in the Scottish Cup, they should take that away from them, and it should go to the next position in the league. And they've since done that, but I was too late. By the time that went through, they actually discussed that. It was too late because that season the European teams had already been decided upon, and that was too late to change it. So that things like that were a bit frustrating. It takes a little bit of time to do these things, John.
And with that there, I mean, were there any kind of big decisions that you tried to bring in that you never quite got over?
There was quite one or two of the ones get in, but there was things like I mean, remember when the two players got suspended for banned for playing Europe, Alan McGregor and Barry Ferguson.
Yep.
You know, they were banned, but I was against that. I voted against that. I didn't want that to happen, but I couldn't do anything about it because it went to the board decision was to do it, sort of thing. But there was things that I wanted to make changes in certain aspects to even the somebody who gets booked in a semi-final shouldn't miss a final because of that for a cup game. Because what I said was the booking might be wrong, and a player can't appeal a yellow card, but because he got a yellow card, he misses the final. Now this could be the only final in his whole career he plays in, and because it was an unfair yellow card, he's can't play in the final. So things like that, but that never got through and never got accepted. So there was a few things along the way that was hard for me to try and get in.
And did you feel as well that when you were looking at these decisions and when you were thinking about it, you know, when you're talking about the kind of yellow card rule with the cup final, that you were looking at that more so from the point of a player as well, because you had been in a position to know how players feel?
Definitely, that was my background on that, because I think myself, I would know exactly how to feel if it ever happened, it happened to me or even other people. Because even when I was at Brighton, we got to the cup final, and Steve Foster, the captain of Brighton, he was captain of the team, and he couldn't play in the final because he got a yellow card in the semi-final, and that yellow card was unfair, and it proved up later on it was a mistake, but he couldn't appeal it. So they were playing a cup final, and the captain of the team couldn't play, and he never played in a cup final. So that were obvious things to do. You know, it was a bit frustrating. I mean, football's one of these things at the highest level. Things are so slow to change. It really is. That's frustrating as anything. Because even when I was at the SFA, I was in a committee with UEFA and FIFA, and it was a football committee. It was all ex players, and I actually proposed VAR at that time. What I said was that they should actually be looking at decisions get made right away so they could be changed. And the reason I thought it was, do you remember when Ireland get put out of the cup, when Thierry Henry handled the ball, played it across, and France scored? Now, what I said at the meeting was, I'm like millions of people watching that at home, realising that goal should be disallowed. Why can the referee not be told immediately that goal should be disallowed? It's quite simple because it's on film. And they all said at that time, no, we don't want to change the game. Controversy is a great part of the game. And I said, well, controversy is when there's no cameras there and you can have a debate on it. I said, if it's actually there to be seen, that's not controversy. That's not a debate. That's just a mistake. But it got voted out. Eventually, like anything else that happens, it comes in. Like goal line technology was the same. It got voted against, and then eventually we've got it now at the highest level. But the VAR thing, I still think it can be improved, because when I first put it forward, I actually said it was to be like tennis, whereby it was the team that were the problem with it had the two challenges per game from the technical area. Do you know what I mean? So what happened was they challenged, and the referee then would look at the footage and then decide whether they got it right. And if they get the two challenges wrong, they've lost their challenges. But if they get it right, they keep the two. And I said it like that. But then I'll name drop here. Franz Beckenbauer was the one that came in and said, Gordon, football and tennis are very different games. And I said, well, I'm not saying they're the same game. I'm just saying they do that in tennis. So why can we not do it in football and challenge things and have it seen? But it got thrown out.
And when you look at VAR now, is that how you envisioned? I know you're talking about the challenges, but out with the kind of challenge aspect, how it works, is that how you would have envisioned it working?
No, I think it takes too long, John. Now, I think it's stopping the game a lot of the times. It takes far too long for them to make a decision. They are looking at everything these days, I suppose. Every little thing. They even go back quite a long way to see if there's been a free kick leading up to a goal or something like that. But in my situation, I was only saying there should only be three situations you're looking at. That's a free kick that could lead to a goal, the edge of the box, a penalty kick, or offside, four things actually. The fourth one was a nodding off could be looked at. So they're the things that could be challenged, and then look at the footage. But you actually have two. Twice the people can actually complain about it. Two challenges, and if they get it wrong, that's them lost them. And I felt that would stop there'd be too many hold-ups in the game. But I'm still in favour of it, the fact that it's in. I must be honest with you, even though it takes long, there's too many mistakes. There's still improving the game to that respect. But I think there's also now a new rule coming out for offside. Arsene Wenger, I knew, was working on it for quite some time, and offside is going to be only if the player if there's any space difference between the player and the defender. If there's any space between them, that's offside. If there's not, if they're still touching each other level and the player's just slightly in front, that's not going to be offside anymore. And I agree with that.
Yeah, 100%. Because you see a lot of the kind of daft decisions where their shoulder was offside,
the toe even.
Aye.
I know. That's right. It is. It's too many daft decisions like that. So hopefully this is going to improve that.
And being in kind of that position as well, did you look at the kind of structures of the lower leagues in Scotland?
Yes. Well, I did. But one of the things was I'd left the SFA. In fact, I hadn't. At the time I was at the SFA, I actually went to see the league. There was three bodies in those days, right? There was the league, there was the SPFL or SPL it was called, and the SFA. So I went to see the David Longmuir at the league and said, here's my suggestion. You've got League One and you've got League Two. Why don't you make it regional? League One North and League One South, so that the teams in those lower divisions are only playing in their own region against these teams. And then what happens is they could have playoffs at the end of the year, and that's who gets promoted into the championship. And he said, that's a good idea. I'll put it to the clubs. And they came back. In fact, the other aspect of it I need to tell you about was the fact that I said that there should be the B teams should be in those leagues too. The six most northerly B teams should be in League One North, and the six most southerly B teams from the Premier League should be League One South. So he said, right, I'll put it to the clubs. And they came back and said they've rejected it. I said, why? And he goes, well, they don't want B teams because they think the B teams will get all the publicity and they won't get any publicity because there's B teams in their league. And I said, what publicity do they get now anyway?
Yeah.
They don't get much anyway. That's what I said, but they rejected it.
And especially when you look, because one of the things that I kind of hear a lot when I'm going round to these grounds and I'm talking to like kind of managers and different things at these clubs, that a big strain in them at times can be travel costs.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. That was my whole point about it, was the travel costs would be reduced because they were playing in their own region. They weren't having to go from Elgin to Berwick or whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was what I was trying to put across. And the other aspect was what I said was the B teams would always play at their own stadium. So the B teams would never play out any home games. Every game of the B teams would be at their own stadium. Now that actually meant they had 30 league games, right? Of the 16 teams in each league, 30 league games, 21 of them would be at home. Now, 21 games at home, B teams bringing in crowds as well, you think about it, and less travel, less costs. Would that not be a benefit the game? And yet, rejected.
And especially now when you look at the Lowland League and teams that are going into that, they're kind of, some of their gate receipts and paydays are when they're playing B teams.
Correct, exactly, and that's the point I made. Imagine, even like Berwick or whatever, they've got a home game against like Celtic B team or Rangers B team. They're going to make money on that. People will go and see that because they're going to see these not only the home team, but they're going to see the young players that are coming through at the Old Firm and all that sort of thing. They would make money from it. And as I say, if every one of the games, if every one, John, was at home game, they're going to make more money. And yet, it's typical. They just rejected it because the B teams will get all the publicity and all that. But you're absolutely right. I mean, you look at Rangers. Even when Rangers were down in the lower divisions in Scotland, the teams made money from that. The lower division teams made a lot of money. The stadiums were generally full, but there was also a lot of money went to the towns because of the fans that were coming into the towns, weren't they? The shops and the restaurants and the cafeterias and all that sort of thing. The bars even. Money was getting made by the fact that the Rangers were in the lower divisions, and that would happen as well with the B teams.
And I think the thing is as well, when Rangers did kind of drop down and they were in the lower divisions, there was TV rights, there was games on the telly, as you're saying, stadiums were selling out. You know, never as much had the lower league teams had to ticket games.
Yeah, exactly. I know. The first time they'd ever had to ticket their matches because Rangers were going to be playing there. Now, it maybe wouldn't be as big a crowds, but I think it would be close to it, the fact if it was B teams as well, because the fans would come out to see those B teams. And as I say, if every game was a home game for the teams against whoever was playing B team, even if we were playing like a Motherwell B team or whatever, they would still get more people than they would normally get if it was a team from coming down, as say, for Elgin or Montrose or something like that, wouldn't they?
Well, you would think 100%, because then when you look at, obviously all these kind of teams, especially the likes of Rangers and Celtic as well, they've got fans all over Scotland. They've got fans all over the world, but up and down Scotland. So a lot of people that maybe can't get to Ibrox and things when they're seeing their B team playing will want to go.
Yeah.
Then the interest comes in when you see the likes of Motherwell, Hearts, Aberdeen, and the likes get in, that they're feeling that they're going to go and they're going to actually watch a game of football with some exciting kind of young players coming through. Yeah.
And as I say, I think it would benefit these teams too, because what I've always been in the belief that I don't like the development squads, the youth teams, under 20s and all that. I was always against that. I feel that reserve team football is what it should be, so that the young players play alongside men against men. It's not boys against boys. You know what I mean? Because then you mature quicker. I mean, I was in the Commander Reserve team at 16, and I was in the first team at 17. Now that was because I was used to playing with men against men as well. So I was mature. So it wasn't a case of saying, if I'd been playing under 20s football, they'd have been looking at me thinking, yeah, he's okay, but that's just his age group he's playing against and all that. But I never agreed with that. So that's why I don't see why even some of the professional clubs, John, are not wanting to have B teams. And I don't understand that. Why not have a B team like a reserve team? Because it's very popular abroad, see, in Spain and Italy and all that, and even Germany. They've all got B teams playing in the regional leagues and all that. That's how the game develops over these places. And yet we're backward.
And do you not think that, because I think was it Rangers that had recently says that they weren't putting a B team?
I think they were holding back in it. I don't know if it was Rangers that said that, because I think Rangers have got a B team. They're not. They've got
I think
one.
it was going to the Lowland.
You might be right. I'm not sure about it, but Lowland League, I think so. But I think that I'm totally in favour of B teams.
And when you look at the kind of pyramid system in Scotland for promotion and relegation, do you think that's pretty fair across the board?
I think it's fair, but as I say, I would still, even though there's promotion and as a pyramid system in order to bring teams forward, it's a good system in terms of, because then you know you're always going to get a bit more quality coming forward. But I still think that I would still regionalise it, John. If I was them, I would still have the fact that even teams moving up Division 1 North and Division 1 South should still be regionalised, so that whoever's coming up from, say, even if you get the Highland League teams coming down, they go into Division 1 North, and Division 1 South is a Lowland League. So that if it's all Lowland League, they would all be in that league sort of thing. But I think you need to have spread it out around the country. So you've got a team, you've got a division below the leagues as well that come through, like they have in England and all that sort of thing. They have the leagues down there, so the teams can come through. I am in favour of that, but it's got to be run in the correct manner. As I say, regionalisation for me is a crucial element of it. That's what should happen in Scotland, because I say it's a big. You mentioned it earlier on, John. It's a big expense for teams to have to put on buses and travel and all that, especially at times where players are part-time too. So a lot of the players in these lower divisions, they have to take time off their work and all that to travel away down a whole day, whereas they wouldn't have to do that as much if their games were in the region where they're working as well.
And it's funny as well, because when you had mentioned about it coming back and I'm talking about B teams getting publicity, and I'm just going to be quite honest, because one of the things that I find a lot of in people that I speak to that are involved with kind of clubs and teams just now, they complain that there's no publicity or very little publicity. So even having B teams about would then generate, You know, because if you're playing a B team and they're worried that the B team's going to get publicity, I mean, if you beat that B team, then surely that publicity is going to fall on you.
Correct. That's right. That's what I'm saying. For them to say, "Oh, we don't get any publicity and all that," and the B teams are getting all the publicity, but the B teams have got to play against somebody. So as you say, the B teams, they might get, if they get publicity for winning, then the team maybe even still gets a bit of publicity because B team's beating a good team that's going well in the league. Now they can't be promoted. That was the point I made. That they don't get promoted, the B teams. They have to stay in that division, and the promotion comes from the teams who actually are in the league, who are the league teams that are generally there for their own good. They're the ones that can be promoted. So, but in that respect, then you have playoffs and all that sort of thing. There'd be money to be made there, and there would be publicity, because the fact that these B teams are in the league and they still managed to beat these B teams and were above them and all that thing, even though the B teams can't be promoted, they would still get good publicity in the fact that they're having games against them and winning, and they would learn more about their players. Now, you think this is the other aspect that I put forward, that the players then would be seen by the professional clubs that maybe they're playing in the lower leagues, but they would maybe then look at players and say, wait a minute, this boy is better than some of the B teams players we've got, and they maybe make a bid and buy a player from a lower league team. You know what I mean? Arbroath maybe sell a player, Montrose or Elgin. So they could actually, they'd actually maybe get more development in their own players and actually put more of a value on them because they're playing against higher league players. So where's the problem with that as well, John?
And one of the questions, and it kind of leads on there quite nicely, is because I've had a lot of mixed answers from this when I've asked managers, directors and former players. Previously, when there used to be the rule surrounding the homegrown players being in a squad and under 21s, did you think for Scottish football, in regards to now national football, that was positive? In
terms of players, I actually think the teams should be able to pick whoever they want for their teams, to be honest with you. I don't think there should be restrictions in terms of age or anything. It should just be, this is the team we're playing. If they're in a league, you play that team you want. So I don't see why they have to have restrictions on that basis. I really don't.
And I just want to kind of quickly touch on, you went back to Rangers for a period of time. How did it come about going back, and what was the feeling like going back to a club that, you supported, you followed, you played with, had a great career with?
What happened was I met Craig Whyte. I got introduced to him, and I just spoke a little bit to him. Then next thing he asked to see me. He says, "I'm interested. He'd just taken over at Rangers." He said, I need to know some ideas about how I structure it." So I gave him advice, and one of the things I did mention to him was, I said, "You should have a director of football." I said, because what happens is the chairman at a football club that might not necessarily know the football departments. I said, what you need is a director of football, somebody who can analyse all the different departments and give a report on them and analysis on them and actually support them and speak to them as well. And he went, all right. So then next thing he came back and said, can I meet you again? And he said, what you told me about director of football, I'm thinking of doing that. And I said, well, I think it's the right idea. He said, but I'd like you to do it. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, I would like you to come in as a director of football. So I wasn't sure about it. And I said, okay. So I went in, I took the job, and I found out not long after that it was Craig Whyte was not a football man, really. He wasn't a football guy at all. He just it was a business thing in his point of view, because I was doing reports for him in terms of the changes that I felt needed done at Rangers. In terms of the different departments, John, right? I did reports to say this has to change, because what I was looking at was scouting, youth development, the medical side of things, recruitment, and the first team, the reserves, all that. I did reports on all these kind of things to say, here's how good they are, here's things maybe that could improve, that sort of thing. But then I kept saying to him, have you changed? You read my reports, are you going to do it? He goes, we'll get round to it. Just kept saying that. He never ever, kept saying that. I only spoke to him about 3 or 4 times, and he just said, we'll get round to it. Never did. But so what happened was, then there was financial problems were obviously there, because I could tell in terms of what he was saying at any board meeting or meeting we had. I wasn't at the board meeting, it was any meeting with the chief exec, that there was problems financially and everything like that. And before we knew it, 6 months into it, when I was there, it was administration, and I left immediately. I just said, "There's no need for a director of football now." It was bad. I couldn't get doing my job, even when I was when before I went into administration. But I said, now that's administration, I'm as well just out, and that's why I just left immediately. Yeah. So I must be honest. Looking back on it, it's a frustration that I actually went in, because it's I say, being a bit selfish, I'm saying it was bad for my reputation to go in during that era and spend time there when really it was not a good era to be in there. Because, as I say, Craig Whyte, I don't have anything against him at all, but I did realise he wasn't really a football guy, and that was the problem there. And there was obviously financial problems right all the way through. Even though when he was in there, everybody was saying he was a multi-millionaire and everything's going to be good and all that, it obviously wasn't.
And do you think, and just kind of quickly touching it, that for you it was maybe just a bit blinkered because that was a club that you kind of held really close to the chance to get back in?
I think so. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I felt that was the reason I went in the end up. I didn't mind giving them the advice in terms of what he should be doing, in terms of how he should structure the club, in terms of having a director of football. But the reason I took the job was basically based on the fact that I felt I could do something there. I had something to offer, and that I could get in and actually improve things if I get the go ahead to do it, and the support from him. But I never got that, so I never really made any changes in there whatsoever, and that's the frustration element of it. Yeah. I was wasting my time there, and as I say, reputation-wise, it didn't do me any good.
And just kind of finally, because I really appreciate the time that you've took with us today, Gordon. When you look at Scotland, so if we look at the Championship, is there a kind of team that you would pick out the Championship that you think will be there or thereabouts come the end of the season?
I think when you look at it, I think there's a good competition in the Championship, to be honest with you. But I always think that, a big club who are in the Championship is definitely Dunfermline. I always think Dunfermline, when I was growing up, Dunfermline were always like a top league team up there challenging for European places and all that. And they've got a big support. So I think that, they've got that can help. Dundee United obviously going to be a major challenger as well. Yeah. They're a big club down there. But, I admire the ones that don't have the kind of money in the back end that still can compete. I mean, 2 years ago, it was Arbroath who did a fantastic job. Dick Campbell had them up there challenging for promotion. That was tremendous. But as I say, it's a tough division. It's hard, very hard. Partick Thistle did really well last year. They were only fourth in the league, but they came so close to getting up that they might still be able to do that. They've had some financial support, new sponsoring and all that sort of thing. So I think it's a good league. I think it's going to be a real top class challenge again this year. It's like last year was the same. It's hard to choose when two teams in that Championship are playing. It's very hard to pick who's going to be a winner.
Yeah, because I think it was at the end of last season where there was umpteen teams at one point during the last games that were promoted, and it was chopping and changing.
Absolutely, I think the very last game of the season, John. I think every single game had basically some purpose, didn't it? I think every game meant there was something getting played for either promotion or relegation or whatever. So it was fantastic that could go all the way to the end of the season. You've got a league there where there's every game's an interesting game. Whereas a lot of times in some leagues, you get like meaningless games. But that certainly didn't happen in the Championship, and I think this year will be the same.
And then if we drop down to League One, because it's quite weird as well, because the mix in League One with part-time and full-time teams.
Yeah, mainly as part-time even at that level. But some of the teams, I mean, even this year, Cove Rangers, I think, are even they're going full-time now, sort of thing. So they're obviously trying to get up from League Two, sort of thing. But I think that there's no doubt about it that it's a financial aspect of it. But in the main, some of the clubs have to wait until they can get into that Championship now before they actually consider going full-time. And that's maybe why the full-time teams in that League One will be considered favourites to get promoted.
Yeah. And then just finally, if you look at League Two, is there any kind of team that you would pick out, or a couple of teams that you think will be there or thereabouts?
Well, I think Cove are League Two, aren't they? They're League Two, and they're going full time. So I would imagine they might be about the only team in that league who are full time as such. So I think that it's going to be difficult to say. It's very, very hard to pick somebody. But if you're full time then you would expect really you're going to be challenging for promotion with that. So I would imagine they'll be right up there. But there's quite a few teams. I think there's not much in it in that league. There's definitely the same as the Championship. I think League Two is a difficult one. But the big problem is always who's going to go down as well, because the last thing they want to do is drop out that league, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it was funny because I very quickly I spoke about it the other day. It was Albion Rovers, and their last league game of the season, they played Stirling Albion, who were champions, and Rovers beat them.
I know. It was unbelievable. But you just wonder whether Stirling Albion, because they'd already won the league, it's like sometimes the teams just switch off. Celtic even just switched off after they won the league at the top level this year because
with Dan Young, I was speaking to recently, and he told me there was 6 or 7 players out, but even he didn't expect to get beaten that game.
Is that right? Yeah. And 6 or 7 players out, did they?
Well, I think, I don't know if it's one of them that would rise every person he speaks to, though.
It can happen, though, because I say, you look at teams when they win things, they certainly just switch off right away, because that's them. They've achieved their goal, and it's hardest thing to keep players going once they do that. And as I say, Partick Thistle were kept going this year because they had something to play for all the way, and your other teams just like switch off. The season's finished, nothing more to play for, and it's certainly teams that win the league can switch off in the last few games. And as I say, Celtic happened with them. They won the league, and then the 2 games after that they were pretty poor, weren't they?
And I mean, 100%, you kind of see it quite a lot. And the very last bit I want to touch on, it was just because you'd mentioned it way back earlier when we spoke, that when you had played, there was always a few teams there challenging. It wasn't just the 2.
Yeah.
What do you think kind of the major differences have been from then to now? When, I mean, let's be honest, if we were to see anybody other than Rangers or Celtic win that league, I think everybody's jaws hit the floor.
Yeah. I think the main challenge is quite easy to talk about. The main reason for it is money. There's no doubt about it that in my day there was not the same difference in between the Rangers and Celtic and the other clubs in the league, even wages wise and all that sort of thing. There was nothing in it. Nowadays it's major. Rangers and Celtic can bring in players and pay millions for them. They're on big salaries. None of the other teams can cope really. They can compete in games from time to time. They compete well, but over a season, there's no way they can compete, and it's a financial thing. It's like, look at England as well, the top league there. Because even somebody was talking to me, I was talking to somebody in English football that recently, they were saying that it's really tough to compete against the teams that actually get relegated into the Championship in England, because they come away with such a big payment money, they get for going down, that they're still rich clubs and they still can bring in top players and all that sort of thing. So it's harder. In Scotland, basically, it's down to finance. The money that Rangers and Celtic get compared to the other teams is a big factor. And that wasn't the case in my day at all. Because, as I say, I know even in fact Rangers and Celtic, the wages weren't that much more than what other teams were paying, the Aberdeens and Hearts and Hibs and all that sort of thing. But it's different now.
And the final question I've got for you is, if there was to be a movie made about your life and career in football, who would you pick to play you?
I have no idea who that would be. To think, no, I can't think who would play me. Maybe somebody. I can't think of an actor I would choose for that position. No, maybe. To think, can you think, MD? Who would you think of?
To be honest, I wasn't too sure. I was hoping that you would have your favourite actor or that at the ready, something that you've thought about for quite a while.
No, I never thought of that. I don't think there'd be a movie about me, so I can't think of who would be playing the part. Maybe Robbie Coltrane. I don't know.
But look, Gordon, I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Pleasure.
Thank you for coming on, and all the best.
No bother, and good luck with your podcast going forward, John. All the best.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Take
care. Thanks, then. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.